Good day, good day. I hope that you're doing well. We are continuing with our Bible reading lessons. This is day 125 of our Bible reading. We've read from 1 Chronicles chapters 12, 13, and 14 as usual. I'll be giving you a few lessons from some of the highlighted verses, starting with a high-level overview. Now, in chapter 12, we see mighty warriors joining David at Ziklag. Remember that David had went into a Philistine territory as a way to run away from King Saul, and mighty warriors join David. This is quite different from the mighty warriors mentioned in chapter 11, though some of them might be the same. However, it's a different group in the sense that it's even a larger group, and it points to a group which includes men from every tribe. So we're saying that these are men from every tribe coming to support David, and this really shows their bravery because they are going into a Philistine territory, which is in Ziklag, and two, they're opposing Saul, who's the current sitting king, and yet they're coming here to support David. So, what the writer seems to be doing as well is to give us the idea that David was not just supported by the people closest to him, but David was supported by every tribe in Israel. And thus we see the army that made David king at Hebron. So again, the writer is showing that David's kingship was one that had full support, and thus this man are mentioned and honored in chapter 12. Now, when we look in chapter 13, we see David attempts to bring the ark to Jerusalem, which this first time around it fails. So Uzzah is struck down for touching the ark and was helping the ark there. Of course, we've read all of this back as well in Samuel. And then we also see the ark left at the house of Obed Edom and how he was blessed because the ark was left at his house. So that is chapter 13, familiar stories that we've read before. And then in chapter 14, we see David's palace and family in Jerusalem. David defeats the Philistines, it happens twice, and then God directs David's military victories, which tells us that for David to have been successful in military, this was due to God being with him. It was not just about David being strong in battle, but that the Lord was with him, that God was the one who's directing. And thus we see David inquires of God, and God is directing his path. It's God who directs David's military success. Now let's look into some of the highlighted verses and offer a few lessons, starting now with chapter 12. I've highlighted the first verse, which says, "Now these are the men who came to David at Ziklag while he could not move about freely because of Saul the son of Kish, and they were among the mighty men who helped him in war." So here we can see, as part of the introduction of this section, that David had this mighty man who came to join him. And as I said, that this would have included men from the different tribes. It's really showing a holistic support for David. Last time we did speak a little bit about how David was strong, how David was successful because he had a mighty man close to him. And here we can see quite a similar idea. But what's interesting to note is that the men did not just join David because he was now king. Because, of course, some of the mighty men, we can say that, oh, okay, at what point in time did they join David? Was it because the coast was clear, everything was fine, and now they are the mighty men of David and fighting alongside David? But here we see something quite interesting, that they were with David even when things were difficult, while he could not move about freely. They're joining him at Ziklag. And yes, the writer is showing us that David was being supported throughout, but I just want to note this two things. Number one, that David did need support, as we've spoken about before. David needed support. He needed people to come and help him. That great as he was, great as David was, as he goes down in history as a great king, a great man, he needed support. And we can learn something about this, that we need to be supported. We need people around us. We cannot make it by ourselves. We can value community, the importance of belonging to a good community. And here we can see the second point I want to mention is that the timing of when they're joining him was at a difficult time. So it's not just about having community when things are good. A good community is one that shows up even when things are bad, even when things are really bad. Like, he could not move about freely. They're going into a territory of the Philistines. Why? Because they're coming to support David. And here we can really learn something of being a community as well. That as a community, we should be a community that stands with one another in good times and in bad times. It should not just be in good times only, but also in bad times, that we are there for each other. Let us move to verse 2. It says, they were bowmen and could shoot arrows and sling stones with either the right or the left hand. They were Benjamites, Saul's kinsmen. So here I highlight verse 2 to show us, and I believe this is what the chronicler is also trying to show us. He's trying to show us that the support that David had was not just from Judah. And yes, he's going to mention men from all the tribes, but first and foremost, he even mentions Benjamin, and Benjamin is the Benjaminites is where King Saul comes from, and this shows, and it even says King Saul's kinsmen, kinsmen meaning Saul's family. So he's clearly showing us that the family of Saul, the people close to Saul, also went to support David. So this adds the emphasis. It adds the idea that David's kingship was the blessed kingship. It was the right kingship, that even the Benjaminites went on to join David and abandon their own family member, who is King Saul. So that's one thing that we can see in terms of what the writer is doing. Is showing us the establishing of David's kingdom or kingship was not something which was just out of people just doing whatever they wanted. Even the Benjaminites were there. But for us, there's something we can learn as well here, that we too can be in a position, depending on what's going on in circumstances, where we can even abandon those closest to us for the sake of doing what is right. Some people may want to do what is wrong just for the sake of sticking with their family members, just for the sake of sticking with their friends, just for the sake of sticking with people closest to them. But actually, we can really respect the Benjaminites for having done what they did, abandoning Saul and joining David. One will say, no, but why are they not supporting their kinsmen? They were doing the right thing. So this is an encouragement for us to do the right thing, even when it is not favorable, even when we might be at a loss. Some of us want to do the right thing only when it benefits us, only when it puts us in a good position. No, the right thing should be done all the time. If it means we're abandoning something, let us do the right thing. Of course, primarily, we do want to ensure that we are loving our families, we are supporting our friends, we're there for people close to us. But there will be times where the right thing to be done would oppose family, would oppose those closest to us. And this is something which is interesting, because Jesus alludes to the idea that, he says, do not think that I came to bring peace, but I came to bring a sword, which is going to divide mother and daughter-in-law. And he goes on to list different kinds of relationships. I always find it interesting that he never listed husband and wife. Jesus did not want to put them asunder, those who have been joined together by God. Now, but nonetheless, we can see that doing right should be what is pursued. We should pursue righteousness, even if it means that we are in pain, or we are getting hurt, or it's difficult. Whatever it takes, let us pursue righteousness. All right, let us move on now to verse 17. Verse 17 says, when David went out to meet them and said, if you have come to me in friendship to help me, my heart will be joined to you. But if to betray me to my adversaries, although there is no wrong in my hands, then may the God of our fathers see and rebuke you. So what I find interesting about David's heart here is that the men who came to join David, to support David, they're coming from all over, from Benjamin, from all over. How is he to know that one of them is a spy? And David doesn't, David is in this situation now where he does need help, he does need support. David doesn't say, okay, because I don't know if you are a spy, okay, now let's now start investigating each one of you. starting conspiracy theories, and he doesn't go in this assignment, this project of finding out who is here for me, who's not here for me. He actually lets it be in God's hands. Say, okay, if you're here in friendship, then my heart will be joined to you. But if you're here to betray me, then may God of our fathers see and rebuke you. Yeah, I think we can learn something really practical about relationships in general as we relate with people. That we can really let go and say, God, you fight our battles. We're not going to fight for ourselves. So I like David's attitude when it came to how he dealt with people around him, that he would not want to take matters in his own hands and say, okay, let me figure out everything. No, he just says, may the God of our fathers see and rebuke you. So we can clearly see here that David was interested in just having peace with people and not fighting and going into all sorts of battles with the people. And I think we can learn something about just what's our attitude. And one thing I'm thinking about is just the freedom for us to be free in God and not to be these people who are just anxious all the time, these people who are insecure. You're just insecure about everyone around you. Someone comes, joins your church, and like, yo, is this person here for the right thing? Or yo, I'm worried about them and so on. No, we don't need to be insecure. Let us just leave it in God's hand. And what is beautiful about it is that imagine if none of those people who came, imagine if all of them, they came to really support David, and he was insecure, he's busy investigating. Now he's discouraging the very people who came to help him. So I think we can learn something here, that putting away insecurity is the best thing. You let go and let God, you put it in God's hand, you trust in God. But importantly, it would even help you to establish better relationships when you're not trying to think bad about others. I think our default should be to think good about others, not to think evil about others. But if they are evil, may God judge them. May God rebuke them. So we leave it in God's hand. So I think that's an interesting character that David had, which we can learn from. Of course, we should apply wisdom in every situation. If things are clear that there's danger, we should really apply wisdom and not place ourselves in danger. So that's not to say that let's go into something when we can clearly see that something is wrong here. We can still apply wisdom, especially when we have clarity. But if you don't have clarity, I think that our best thing to do is just to consider others in a good way. Consider others not as just evil people or bad people. No, consider others in a good way. But we should apply wisdom. All right, now let us move to the next verse, which is verse 32. Verse 32 is a very famous verse, and I thought, no, let me highlight verse 32 and speak a little bit about it. It says, of Issachar, men who had understanding of times to know what Israel ought to do, 200 chiefs and their kinsmen under their command. So here we can see that the chronicler is listing different men who came to support David. And sometimes he would insert a comment. I mean, let's read verse 31, just the verse before it. Of the half tribe of Manasseh, 18,000 who were expressly named to come and make David king. So here we can see that the comment he gave is that they were expressly named. It's as if that there was an intentionality behind this. It was not just that, okay, let's just all go. No, they were expressly named to come and make David king. So what he's doing is he's giving some comment as it goes along with each of the tribes, the men who came. And then verse 30 says, of the Ephraimites, 20,800 mighty men of valor, famous men in their father's houses. So here we can see that what he's doing as a trend is that he's giving a comment which helps to amplify the idea that when David was made king, it was the right thing to do. It was not out of people who were just trying to do things in their own hands, because every comment is giving has something to do with supporting the idea that when David was made king, it was the right thing to do. It was right that the kingship left the house of Saul, left the Benjaminites and came to the house of David and came to Judah. So every comment is adding, it has to do with amplifying that it was right for David to be put up. I mean, look what he says in verse 29. Of the Benjaminites, the kinsmen of Saul. So he reminds you that they are actually Saul's family men, 3,000, of whom the majority had to that point kept their allegiance to the house of Saul. So he's even telling us that these people, it's not like they're just choosing wherever they want. No, they really did have a good relation and allegiance to the house of Saul, but they needed to do the right thing. David was the right king. So this is what the writer is doing. Is showing us that David was the right king. And then onto the verse I've highlighted, verse 32, which is a famous verse. People use verse 32 to speak of, they had understanding of times. They had understanding of times. And they use it to speak on things like, we need to be like the man of Issachar. We need to understand the times. We need to, and they use it maybe in a business sense, business understanding that, you need to watch the markets. It's as if they understood markets. No, it was not about understanding markets. The writer is showing us that every tribe had a good move to come and help David, to come and place David as king. Is amplifying the idea that David was really a king of choice, not just by God, which is first and foremost the most important, but also every tribe did come to support. So how then can we understand verse 32? We can understand it to mean that the men of Issachar actually understood that the time is now for the kingdom to shift from the house of Saul to the house of David. That's the times they understood. It's not so much that he's saying that the men of Issachar before all of these events were men who were very good with time, that they were analysts, they had spiritual understanding of time in a special way. No, this is about the time of shifting the kingdom from the house of Saul to the house of David. And they understood the times, they understood the season we're in, that no, it is right, this is what ought to be happening. And when you have read it in context, you begin to see that, that's exactly what each tribe is doing. The tribes are all going to support David, and this is the right time. And that's what it means. And I mean, I think one application for us is really to understand when God is doing something, and to be a part of it, to recognize that no, this is what God is doing. This is not just something which is being done out of people forcing matters. This is something of God. So it's about discernment, really. Discernment of, is this a work of God or a work of people? Okay, let me move. Verse 33 says, of Zebulun 50,000 seasoned troops, equipped for battle with all the weapons of war, to help David with singleness of purpose. So I really just wanted to highlight that part of with singleness of purpose, that this men of Zebulun, and I believe we can expand it and say the whole of Israel, they had one single purpose. Yes, the men of Zebulun had, they had weapons of war. They were strong in battle. They had seasoned troops. But even though you have seasoned troops and you have weapons of war, that doesn't help if you don't have a single purpose. If you're not in unity. So unity is an important word here. But I think we can see that even in the rest of the tribes and all Israel, in terms of all of these men who were coming to support David, that there was one single purpose: to help David, to make David king. The lesson there being unity. Let us also learn from this man and embrace unity, being a united people. Let us now move to chapter 13. So in chapter 13, I've highlighted verse 1, which says, David consulted with the commanders of thousands and of hundreds, with every leader. So the reason I highlight this verse is, once again, I find it interesting that David is being made king. He's receiving all the support. He could have just made a decision and say, okay, I think the ark must be brought, and that's it. But it says he consulted. And I think this is something which we can learn about good leadership. Leadership consults. We're not here to lord it over people. It's about being a servant leader. We need to be servant leaders. We need to realize that we're not here to command the people. We're here to shepherd and love the people and care for the people. That's a very important principle of leadership, at least of leadership in the spiritual sense, that we are really to embrace consulting. And I think we can even learn this in the business sense. Even out in commerce, we can learn something here, that we don't lord it over the people. So it says that David consulted with the commanders of thousands and of hundreds. I find it interesting that he did not just consult with the commanders of thousands. He said these are the important ones. Even with the commanders of hundreds. With every leader, in fact, it continues to say, with every leader. So we can learn something about a leadership which consults with its people, not just forcing matters and people must do whatever the leader says. Now, verse 8 says, which I've also highlighted as we move, verse 8 says, and David and all Israel were celebrating before God with all their might, with song and lyres and harps and tambourines and cymbals and trumpets. Isn't it quite interesting that they are moving the ark of God in the wrong way, by the way, as we have learned? They're moving the ark of God in the wrong way. They're celebrating before God. And this celebration is a genuine celebration. It says with all their might, with songs, harps. So we can see that they're praising God, and yet God would bring a judgment upon Uzzah, who put out his hand to take hold of the ark, for the oxen had stumbled. So I found verse 8 quite an interesting background of what was happening when Uzzah was killed by God. That God does still bring judgment when people are genuinely praising him, as long as they're doing something wrong. So the praise was right, but there was something else which was wrong. They're moving the ark using a cart, and that's not allowed. It must be carried on the shoulders. And then poor Uzzah attempted to help the ark by taking hold of it because the oxen had stumbled. So I find it very interesting that God would still bring upon a judgment even though the people were praising him. So don't think that praise is a substitute of obedience. I think that's the lesson. Praise does not substitute obedience. You singing with all your might and dancing before God. And yes, let that happen. Please, let's celebrate before God. Let's sing. Let's come with all musical instrumentals and praise our King. But don't think that praising him substitutes obedience. Let us move to the last chapter, chapter 14 for today. Chapter 14, I've highlighted only one verse, which is verse 14. So that's 1 Chronicles chapter 14, verse 14, which says, and when David again inquired of God, so again, when you read the word again there, it shows us that he did not inquire God just one time. David always inquired of God. David did not say that, oh, okay, I inquired from God, he told me to do it, then this time around I'm just going to do it anyway. No, it says when David again inquired of God. So it is an encouragement for us. Let us keep on praying. Let us keep on seeking God. Let us keep on reading his word, hearing from God, learning from God through his word as we read the Bible. David again inquired of God. Let's not be stuck in just, okay, God said it this way last time, therefore that's it. And what's quite interesting is that this time God gives a different answer. He says, you shall not go up after them, go around and come against them opposite the Baslam trees. So we can clearly see here that it was helpful for David to inquire again because God actually gave him a different strategy. And that's my encouragement. Let us be those who keep on seeking the Lord through prayer, through reading our Bible, through community as well. As we're part of a community, God will speak to you through other people. He'll speak to you through dreams and many other ways. But ultimately, let us be a people who continue to seek God. Amen and amen.